Senate, please come to order. Good morning, Madam Clerk. Will you please call the roll?
Good morning, Madam President. Senator Baker, Senator Chun Oakland, Senator Dela Cruz, Senator English, Senator Espero, Senator Gabbard, Senator Galataria, Senator Green, Senator He, Senator Ige,
Excused for now. I believe he's on his way.
Senator Ihara, Senator Kahele, Senator Keith Agaran, Senator Kidani, Senator Kochi, Senator Nishihara, Senator Ruderman, Senator Shimabukuro, Senator Sloan,
very traditionally here.
Senator Solomon, Senator Taniguchi, Senator Thielen, Senator Tokuda, Senator Wakai. Madam President,
Here.
24 present, 1 excused.
The chair has read the journal of the preceding day and approves the same. Are there any introductions this morning?
Madam President.
Senator Baker.
Thank you, Madam President. In the gallery is a good friend and former colleague of mine and some of us on the floor when we were in the House. Would our former Vice Speaker, Jackie Young, please rise to be recognized? Thank you, Madam President.
Further introductions, Senator Ihara.
Madam President, I'd like to introduce to the body and gallery an intern, one of my 2 interns. She is from Hawaii Pacific University. Her name is Jocelyn Idris. Could you stand and be recognized right here? Welcome. She's very excited to be here during the special session.
Thank you. Further introductions, members? Senator Sloan.
Good morning, Madam President and
morning.
colleagues. I too would like to introduce some special interns that we have with us this morning. First of all, I'd like to introduce Nadia Pashkova from the Ukraine, Irene Danilyan from Armenia, and Alyssa Turnbull all the way from the North Shore. Welcome. Thank you, colleagues.
Senator He.
Thank you, Madam President. I have an introduction to make at this time. It has to do specifically with the issue we are taking up today. With us in the gallery is the individual most responsible for changing the paradigm of same-gender marriage in the United States of America. He did so as an Associate Justice for the Hawaii Supreme Court. It is truly a great honor to take this occasion to acknowledge his hard work for humanity, for equality, and for justice. It is long overdue that he should be given his day before the public. And I want to say this in the context of so many others from Hawaii who have caused for public policy to shift. And those would include people like Senator Najo Yoshinaga, who was critical in creating the public health care law that Hawaii was the first. The legislature of 1970, which made Hawaii the first state affording women the right to choose. In this particular case, I want to acknowledge retired Associate Justice Stephen Levinson, who said when interviewed before the Senate, at that time was the Committee on Executive Appointments, when asked by former Senator Ann Kobayashi his views on equal rights for gays and lesbians. He said in the article he thought about it, not anticipating the question. And then he looked at Senator Kobayashi and said, I would do all that I can to ensure that equal rights were extended to everyone, including gays and lesbians. He said in the interview, quote, "It was exciting. Although one joins a court hoping that one might have an opportunity to bring about profound change for the better. An opportunity presented like Bear v. Lewin doesn't come along every day. And then he said, the Hawaii Supreme Court changed the history of the world. And it did, indeed it has. And he is the author of what has become known as the Levinson decision. I am honored at this time to introduce to all of us the Honorable Retired Associate Justice of the Hawaii Supreme Court, Stephen Levinson. Will you please rise?
Senator Solomon,
Thank you very much, Madam President, and also on a point of personal privilege.
please proceed.
I just would like to echo the remarks of the previous speaker. I too was at the time in the legislature, and I want to pay my respects to our honorable and to all the many, many persons that did come forward to testify in support, and also to commend our Judiciary Chairman for being able to bring us to this moment. Thank you.
Further introductions, members? If not, Madam Clerk.
We're on page 2, third reading.
If there are no objections from the members, we're taking third reading on consent.
Third reading of Senate Bill number 1 relating to equal rights.
Is there any discussion? If not, are we ready for the question? Senator He.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the Senate. I rise in support of the passage of Senate Bill 1.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much. I wish to frame my support around two groundbreaking civil rights moments where religious overtones, implications, and insinuations dominated the verbal and political landscapes of the day, just as they do today. The year was 1958. 18-year-old Mildred Jeter, who was part black and part Cherokee Indian, and 24-year-old Richard Loving, a white man of Irish-English descent, journeyed from their hometown in Virginia to get married in Washington, D.C. They returned to Virginia, but their matrimonial bliss was abruptly ended 5 weeks later, when during the early morning hours in July, 3 police officers entered their home through an unlocked door. The record indicates that the county sheriff and the 2 deputies found their way into the couple's bedroom, shined a flashlight into their faces, and demanded to know what they were doing in bed together. When Mildred answered, quote, "I am his wife," end quote, and Richard Loving directed the officers to the District of Columbia marriage certificate that hung on the bedroom wall of the sheriff. On the bedroom wall, the sheriff informed them that their marriage was not valid in the state of Virginia. He then arrested the couple and hauled them to jail. The Lovings were charged with having violated the Virginia statutes prohibiting interracial marriage and leaving the state to evade that law. Richard and Mildred Loving pled guilty to the charges, and Judge Leon Bazile sentenced each to 1 year in the county jail, but suspended the sentence on the condition that they agree to leave Virginia and never return together for 25 years. Richard and Mildred Loving went to court to challenge their convictions, contending that the anti-miscegenation law of Virginia violated their constitutional rights to due process and equal protection. In 1965, Judge Bazile reaffirmed the validity of both laws and his original decision, concluding with the following remarks, quote, "Almighty God created the races, white, black, yellow, Malay, and red, and he placed them on separate continents. And but for the interference with his arrangement, there would be no cause for such marriages. The fact that he separated the races shows that he did not intend for races to mix, end quote. On June 12, 1967, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the anti-miscegenation laws violated Americans' 14th Amendment, rights to due process and equal protection under the law, and thus were unconstitutional. Chief Justice Earl Warren, an appointee of President Dwight Eisenhower, delivered the court's unanimous opinion by stating, quote, "Marriage is one of the basic civil rights of man, fundamental to our very existence and survival. To deny this fundamental freedom on so unsupportable a basis as racial classifications embodied in these statutes, classifications so directly subversive of the principle of equality at the heart of the 14th Amendment, is surely to deprive all of the state's citizens of liberty without due process of law. The 14th Amendment requires that the freedom of choice to marry or not marry a person of another race resides with that individual and cannot be infringed upon by the state." In his concurrence, Justice Stewart reiterated in his belief that, quote, "It is simply not possible for a state law to be valid under our Constitution, which makes the criminality of an act depend upon the race of the actor," end quote. You may wonder why I raised this case. On June 12, 2007, just a little over 6 years ago, Mildred Loving, an active member of a Baptist church and widowed for 32 years from the man she fought so hard to wed legally, released a statement commemorating the 40th anniversary of the Loving decision. Entitled "Loving for All," Mrs. Loving proclaimed her belief that all Americans, regardless of race, sex, or sexual orientation, quote, "should have the same freedom to marry." She ended her statement by saying, "That is what the Loving case and loving is all about," end quote. My friends, the defamatory statements, aspersions, and disparagements made by one group during the Loving case against them are eerily similar to the statements we have heard regarding this matter before us today. Like same-sex couples today, interracial couples of the American past faced accusations that their relations were, quote, "unnatural," end quote, were, quote, "evil," end quote, and, quote, were corruptions of what God had intended, end quote. The same assertions made in 1958 that God would punish Americans for violating divine law by marrying across the color line are not that different from those statements you and I received electronically, in writing, and verbally 2 nights ago during the public hearing. Closer to home, the date of case number 2 was March 18th, 1970. The place was here at these very chambers in Honolulu. The issue of that day was the approval of this nation's first law legalizing abortion, a diametric departure from the centuries-old law of the Kingdom of Hawaii, whose punishment was $500 and 2 years imprisonment at hard labor. In his message of what became Act 1 of 1970, Governor John A. Burns lamented the situation of personal attacks to him as a person. Governor Burns said, quote, "I have been subjected to pleadings, warnings, even threats from many sources, including clergymen and lay members of my own Roman Catholic Church and members of other churches and non-religious groups. I have felt that in the heated debates over the abortion question, my reputation has been unfairly and seriously attacked, and sadly enough, by a number of my fellow Roman Catholics who do not appear to understand precisely the separate roles of the state authority and the church authority. I have an obligation as governor in such serious matters to defend my reputation. As the sacred scripture reminds us, a good name is more desirable than great riches and high esteem, than gold and silver. Madam President, one of the repetitive comments your committee heard over and over again at the public hearing was that times and attitudes of society have changed with regard to same-gender marriage, and now is the time for this legislature to act. Similarly, in 1970, Governor Burns commented, quote, "There is reported to be ample evidence that traffic in illegal abortions is considerable in Hawaii, as well as in other jurisdictions covered by restrictive abortion laws. It seems to me that to continue a breach of the law because of a change in the public's attitude on a moral question is inconsistent with the democratic philosophy that the rule of law should prevail at all times. If community standards have changed, we should then change the law rather than continue violating an outmoded law," end quote. Finally, I would note that when commenting on the role of public servants elected to office, Governor Burns said, quote, "He must never let his private political and religious convictions unduly influence his judgment of all people. He must be profoundly conscious of the meaning of the words, the common good." I raise these two examples for obvious reasons. I believe both examples provide a pathway for us today. Just as I believe this legislature's action establishing domestic partnerships, reciprocal benefits, and civil unions have provided a pathway for today's discussion. This is a defining moment in all of our careers, and we should embrace it. The purpose and intent of this measure is to recognize marriages between individuals of the same sex in the state of Hawaii. The intent is to ensure that same-sex couples are able to take full advantage of federal rights, benefits, protections, and responsibilities already granted to married opposite-sex couples by allowing same-sex couples to marry under the laws of this state. And there be no legal distinction between same-sex married couples and opposite married couples with respect to marriage under the laws of this state, by applying all provisions of the law regarding marriage equally to same-sex couples as they do to opposite-sex couples, regardless of whether this act does or does not amend any particular provision of law. The intent of this bill before us, members, is to protect religious freedom and liberty by, one, ensuring that no clergy or other officer of any religious organization will be required to solemnize any marriage in accordance with the Hawaii State Constitution and the United States Constitution. And two, clarifying that unless a religious organization allows use of its facilities or grounds by general public for weddings for a profit, such organizations shall not be required to make its facilities or grounds available for solemnization of any marriage celebration. In September of this year, I was privileged, along with 3 other members of this august body, to travel to the tiny island of Ni'ihau, the last and only Hawaiian island where the native Hawaiian language and culture is alive 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. There is no other place like it anymore, and that fact is indisputable. While there, four of your senators were given the opportunity to hear how the small community of perhaps 100 or so felt threatened by outsiders whose ways and means posed a threat to their well-being and survival. The four of us, along with several others who journeyed to Ni'ihau, heard over and over from Native Hawaiians that help was needed, and we were the ones they looked to for that help in order to survive and to endure as their last Native Hawaiian place. Towards the end, one of the owners of the island addressed us. He said in a very soft voice that Maluhia of the island was at risk, that the Maluhia of the island was threatened, and that the Maluhia of the island was at peril. And as he talked about the Maluhia of the island, his voice cracked with emotion. To most of us who understand Hawaiian, the word Maluhia means peace, such as in the Christmas hymn Silent Night, where the word Maluhia is sung over and over again. But to Bruce Robinson and the native people of Ni'ihau, Maluhia means that everything is right, that all things are in order, and that no one needs to worry. He continued that so long as predators from Kauai were allowed to raid and pillage the natural resources of the nearshore fisheries of Ni'ihau, an island where the entire dependence for protein was upon and came from the sea, there would be no Maluhia on Ni'ihau. Members, with the passage of Senate Bill 1, you define yourself as one who is committed to bring Maluhia to a small community, to bring equality and justice to a community of our family and friends and neighbors who are our school teachers, administrators, small business persons, elected officials, lawyers, judges, athletes, and veterans of the armed services who fight for the freedoms we enjoy today as Americans. I respectfully and humbly ask that you join me in bringing Maluhia to that community who seeks justice. I ask you expand the meaning of aloha to truly include everyone, regardless.
Excuse me, Senator Hia, I'm going to remind the gallery that you are a guest of this chamber and that you must act accordingly with proper decorum. Any audible conversation or demonstration, approval or disapproval at these proceedings, either verbal or gesture, is in violation of Senate rules and the state law, and if it persists, we will ask that you be removed. Senator He, please continue.
Thank you, Madam President. In finishing, members, I ask you to expand the meaning of the word aloha to truly include everyone, regardless of his or her race, his or her color, his or her creed, or his or her sexual orientation. Thank you very much.
Further discussion. Senator Sparrow,
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to rise in support of Senate Bill 1.
please proceed.
And let me begin, but I'm very happy, very honored and privileged to be here in this legislative body as we do take up this very historic piece of legislation, this landmark legislation that will affect many future generations to come. Several sessions ago, I voted no on the civil union bill passed by the Hawaii legislature. It was not an easy vote since I felt both opponents and proponents had valid arguments. Regardless of my vote, I knew one side would be satisfied and happy, and the other side would be disappointed. That is the nature and outcome of some issues that come before us at the state legislature, and we move on to another day and other issues. I knew the possibility of same-sex marriage would come before the legislature one day. Thus, I paid particular attention in the last few years to what was going on nationally, internationally, I read articles, watched talk shows, listened to pundits, talked to constituents and other people interested in same-sex marriage, and especially individuals of faith. I witnessed other politicians evolve on this matter and knew I must be very open-minded when this issue came before us at the legislature. As a person of faith, an individual born into and raised a Roman Catholic, and one who is a practicing Catholic today, I've had moments of deep reflection and thought. I have privately prayed and have asked others to pray for me. Some people have asked me why I am voting yes to same-sex marriage if I am a Catholic. My answer is simple. I was elected to serve all people regardless of faith. Moreover, it is likely over my 14-year career in the state legislature, people who have supported me included Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Jews, Mormons, atheists, and Christians. In regards to the Christian community, many are divided on the matter of same-sex marriage, and there is no clear consensus. Recently, I met a gay Franciscan priest, a Catholic, and his words were encouraging and insightful. Pope Francis has also influenced me, and I am thankful that my church is led by a pope who is compassionate, open-minded, understanding, and merciful. I believe Pope Francis has changed the tone and the direction of the same-sex marriage discussion in my church, and for this, he is a godsend. Some have asked why we don't allow the people to vote on this matter. Since statehood, we have elected citizens to the Hawaii State Legislature to address issues such as this in this legislative arena. Committee hearings are held, public testimony is provided and heard, and we vote as required by laws and rules. As part of the checks and balances, the measure then goes to the governor for approval or veto. Many people feel that same-sex marriage is a civil right, an equal right, or just a societal right, and that issues of this magnitude should not go to a popular vote that could be influenced by slick television ads, catchy newspaper ads, big money, or even a millionaire's bankroll. Some feel if the Civil Rights Bill of the 60s, the Suffrage Act allowing women to vote, or even Social Security were put to a popular vote in the past, those issues probably would have failed. This same-sex marriage legislation belongs in the public arena we call the Hawaii Legislature. Many individuals who are opposed to this measure are against it due to their religious beliefs. They feel their religious rights are being trampled, children will be put at risk, and terrible things will happen if Senate Bill 1 is passed. For those of us who favor this measure, we respectfully disagree. We have included exemptions for churches and religious institutions, and we have language protecting the clergy in Senate Bill 1. We also respect the freedom to worship with one's private personal beliefs. With Senate Bill 1, we will not change anyone's faith or religious doctrine. The LGBT community deserves to be treated with dignity and equality. The LGBT community includes our friends, family members, our coworkers, and employers. We shop at the same stores, eat at the same restaurants, visit the same parks and beaches. We live in the same neighborhoods. And yes, we even worship together based on our beliefs and our faith. I'd like to close with some words from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Isn't that what being in a lasting legal marriage with the person you love is all about? Thank you.
Further discussions. Senator Ishihara.
I rise in support of this measure before us, Senate Bill 1.
Please proceed.
But you know, I'd like to inform the members that throughout the hearing, there are a number of people that came and spoke and raised the issue about, as parents, that their children would be taught what they considered lifestyles and beliefs that violate their beliefs. Having been an educator for 30 years in the DOE, and 10 of which as an administrator, I do realize and understand the department has a number of policies that concern education and what is taught. And I'd like to read this particular one because I think it's pertinent to what was discussed. This was dated May 1st, 2013, from the Office of the Superintendent. The title is Notice on BOE Policy Number 2210 on Controversial Issues. It says, this memo is intended to provide formal notification to all teachers and school administrators regarding the Board of Education Policy 2210 and the Department of Education Regulation 2210.1 as they relate to controversial issues, and to remind all teachers and school administrators of the requirement to follow all BOE policies. Before engaging in any lesson or activity that may touch upon potentially controversial matters, teachers must discuss the potentially controversial matters with his or her principal to determine whether a letter concerning a potential controversial topic should be sent out to parents or legal guardians. And the DOE Regulation 2210.1 requires instructional staff or administration to notify parents or legal guardians of controversial issues that will be discussed in the classroom or through other school activities. This notification may be done through a general letter about the lesson or activity. A sample is attached for your review and utilization. The parents or legal guardians may also, on their own volition, write a letter to the school administrators or teacher to have their child excluded from specific lessons or activity. If such a letter is received, the student must be provided with an alternative learning activity. The parents or legal guardians have an obligation to notify the school administrator or teacher prior to the lesson. And I say prior to the lesson or activity. So I know there was a number of comments made by parents who came to these hearings, stated that they were afraid that the department would teach what they believed, things that were counter to what they believed. And so I assured that those who have come to talk to me that having been a department employee for about 30 years, I can safely say that the department is very risk averse. It will not do any kind of controversial matters without regard to what the parents or the guardians feel. So I'd like to, assuage, any fears that the department is going willy-nilly and do all kinds of stuff. that this does not happen. I don't care what they say about what schools in Massachusetts or Canada may do, but this is Hawaii and this is the policy. So on that, letting you know, I thank you for your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tokuda.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in strong support of Senate Bill 1 relating to equal rights.
Please proceed.
Thank you. First, I'd like to commend Chair He and our Judiciary and Labor Committee for taking on a most Herculean task and working with our outstanding Senate support team to ensure that people were able to participate in the process in a fair, safe, and orderly manner. I'd also like to thank everyone who has sent me their thoughts on this issue, whether it be a phone call, email, or a letter. And I want them to know that I know that this is a deeply personal issue for many individuals in my district and across the state, and I hope to get back to all of you very soon. And when we do connect, it is my sincerest hope that even if we disagree, I hope it can be respectfully so that we can focus on things that we can work together on and move forward from there. As the key strengths and protections provided in this bill have already been covered by many of the previous speakers, I'd like to focus on some of the concerns that have actually been raised by the speaker that just spoke about the impacts this will have on our schools and our children. As an education advocate and as a parent of a public school child, I always appreciate a sincere interest in the well-being of our schools and our students. But let me be very clear. Senate Bill 1 is not about our schools. It's about equal rights. If we must talk about schools, let's talk about the fact that our curriculum is based upon established content and standards that are aligned to the Common Core. The fact that general learner outcomes are stressed, where being a self-directed learner, a community contributor, where we understand that it's essential for human beings to work together, and being a complex thinker and effective communicator are valued, emphasized, and the focus of classroom instruction. The fact that the department defines as one of its stated objectives in its strategic plan, students are connected to their school and community to develop a love of learning and contribute to a vibrant civic life. The fact that Board Policy 2109 states character education is in the process through which students are provided opportunities to learn and demonstrate democratic principles and core ethical values such as civic responsibility, compassion, honesty, integrity, and self-discipline. These are the facts as to the content and curriculum in our public schools. And if any controversial issues should arise, as was mentioned, the board has established parental notification and opt-out policies. As many of you know, the testimony and perspectives provided have not been limited to Hawaii and have in fact talked about the impacts of same-sex marriage on Massachusetts students. Nowhere is it mentioned, however, that Massachusetts is ranked as one of the top school systems in the country, #1 in NAEP scores, and has even been compared globally as trailing just second behind Singapore in science. If you don't believe me, just ask Mitt Romney, who has been known to frequently make the statement that Massachusetts schools are #1 in the country. But again, I must reiterate, while I appreciate the interest in our schools and education, SB1 is not about schools. SB1 is about equal rights. Some of the letters that I have received have asked me to reconsider my position on this issue as a mother of young children. As all of you know, I am a wife and a mother to Matt and Aiden first. And those roles give context to many of the decisions I make here in this body. It did so on this issue as well, but perhaps not in the way that many may think. I have only a few basic things on my life bucket list, and one of those things is to dance with my sons on their wedding day. And maybe it's because my mom didn't get that chance to dance with my brother at his wedding or receive my bouquet at mine. But it got me thinking about all of the other mothers and fathers out there who just want that moment with their child and who've suffered alongside them with their rights denied. Pope Francis said, "Who am I to judge?" I ask, who am I to deny? As parents, we just want what's best for our children. And as we get older, we hope they will be able to find a partner in life that loves and protects them as fiercely as we do, is loyal and kind, and will care for them if we are no longer physically there to do so. I've been blessed in life to be able to find my life partner in my husband, Kyle. Who am I to deny someone else those same rights, benefits, and protections marriage provides us? The last few days have provided me with the opportunity for much reflection, and in doing so, I found this sticker, "Equal marriage rights for all, legalize same-gender marriage." I picked this up almost 20 years ago during the 1994 hearings when people filed through and filled the old Department of Health auditorium across the street, and testifiers were listed on page after page of dot matrix paper taped up on the door waiting to testify. I remember rushing over to those hearings after school, sitting and listening, observing, taking it all in and feeling what was going on around me. And in the end, I remember tucking this very sticker into my folder and telling myself, maybe one day. Then a few years later, in 1998, we were battling to protect our Constitution. And I remember again looking at this very sticker and telling myself again, well, maybe one day. I'm hoping after all this time, when I go again to put this sticker away, I can finally say, it was today. Colleagues, it is an honor and a privilege to stand among you on this day and finally have the chance to vote yes. Thank you.
Further discussion. Senator Kidani.
Thank you, Madam President and honorable colleagues. I rise in strong support of Senate Bill 1.
Please proceed.
The new commandment of Jesus to love one another is part of the final instructions given to his disciples after the Last Supper had ended. This commandment appears 13 times in 12 verses in the New Testament, including John 3:11. For this is a message which ye heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. John 3:23. And this is his commandment, that we should believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another, even as he gave us commandment. John 4:7. Let us love one another, for love is of God. It is not enough to say you care and love someone without also caring about their well-being and their happiness. This bill for marriage equality is not only for constitutional justice, but also to tell our gay brothers and sisters that we recognize your right to the pursuit of happiness. Robert Kennedy, who fought for civil rights in our country at a time when blacks were not treated as equals, once said, "Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. It is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance." Thank you, Senator He and staff and members of the Judiciary Committee for your tireless work. Aloha and maluhia to all.
Further discussion. Senator Woodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of this measure.
Please proceed.
I echo the previous comments from my colleagues that this is a civil rights issue. It's exactly analogous to the hard-fought rights to vote and to marry in the past, regardless of race or gender. And I see this as another step in the march toward liberty and justice for all. I'm honored to support this bill on behalf of the very large gay and lesbian constituency in my district, and the even larger constituency in my district and statewide, for whom tolerance, compassion, and love are the highest values and must guide our actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Senator Keith Agaran.
Thank you, Madam President. In support.
Please proceed.
I appreciate and really admire the comments that were made by the two previous speakers from the windward side of this island. But I want to make a few somewhat personal remarks about this. In 3 weeks, I'll be celebrating my 8th anniversary. So for my friends who know me, obviously my marriage is a work in progress. And I don't claim to be an expert in marriage. But I believe I have enough faith and sober humility to understand that the success or failures in my marriage depend more on the work and love I pour into that committed relationship than whether or not we as a government, whether we as a legislature, and whether we as a community exclude or welcome other Hawaii citizens from entering into marriage. I vote aye.
Further discussion. Senator Galatario.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support
Please proceed.
and thank the minority leader for deferring. Today, colleagues, we gather here in our state capitol, a symbol that has always looked forward and has always been progressive and has always championed progress. We gather in the tradition of those who have come before us, as the gentleman from Kahaluu reminded us. Some wonderful champions of the people. And we've come here to discuss a momentous question, not only before us today, but before our nation. Should government permit men and women of the same sex to marry? It's a question that cuts to the core of who we are as a country and as a state. It's a question that deserves to be answered. It's a question that requires us to step back from the platitudes and partisanship of the everyday political debate and consider the principles that lead us forward. Freedom, liberty, and equality. These are the principles that have animated generations of citizens to expand opportunities to an even wider circle of citizenry. Over many long years, the legal prohibitions to freedom and equality were overcome. Some on the battlefield, some in the State House, and some in the courthouse. Throughout our history, each and every generation has expanded upon the freedoms won by their parents and grandparents. Each and every generation has removed some barrier to full participation in the American dream. Each and every generation has helped our country take another step on the road to a more perfect union, if you will. That, colleagues, is the arc of history, and we participate in that arc today. That is the journey that we must never stop traveling, and that is the reason that we have come into our special session. And although the work on this bill is far from over, there is no doubt that we've passed the tipping point. I guess the question really is now, do we stand up for equality? Is this a time to conquer the next frontier of freedom? Is this a time to be bold, as the pioneers who came before us have suggested? And by the way, Madam President, colleagues, we come from a place like no other in the world, committed to the freedom of religion, artistry, policy, social, personal, no matter what, our ethnicity or orientation. We come from the land of aloha. This has always been what sets us apart. In Hawaii, we take you as you are and let you be as you wish to be. That is the essence of Hawaii. That is what makes us a safe haven for people of every background and orientation. As other states recognize the rights of same-sex couples to marry, we cannot stand by and watch. Now, I understand the desire by some seeking guidance from their religious teachings. I, too, am a faith-based senator. And that is why, under the bill proposed, no church or synagogue or mosque would be required to perform or sanction a same-sex wedding, as is the case in every state that has legalized marriage equality. Long ago, the Supreme Court declared that separate but equal opportunities are inherently unequal. It took the U.S. Supreme Court nearly 60 years after Plessy versus Ferguson, which upheld disparate treatment of non-whites, to come to that conclusion. It took the Supreme Court another 13 years to strike down laws barring interracial marriage, and another 36 years after that to strike down laws criminalizing same-sex relationships. And of course, the recent Supreme Court decision on the Defense of Marriage Act. The march for equality and tolerance in America has sometimes been slow, but it's never stopped. That's democracy. Government either treats everyone the same or it doesn't, and right now it doesn't. That desire for equal standing in society is extraordinarily powerful and has led to extraordinary advances in American freedom. Colleagues, there is no retreating to a past that has disappeared. There is no holding back a wave that has crested. And there is no denying a freedom that belongs to us all. The time has come for us to allow thousands of men and women to become full members of the American family. Together we can work across the aisle to pass a bill allowing all of citizens to walk down the aisle and lead our state and country toward a more perfect union. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Stone.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I stand in strong opposition to this bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you. During the past hour, we've heard many good comments, many good thoughts. And the curtain is coming down today on the drama that has been this political theater. Because, in fact, this was not a special session. It was totally scripted, totally politicized. The votes were extracted and taken before we ever met, or we wouldn't have met. As I said previously, on many occasions, there was no reason, no urgency for a special session devoted to sexual orientation. In the past 12 years, this state has had 2 special sessions unrelated to the Senate's advising and consenting to judicial or cabinet nominees. One had to do with the super ferry and the economic implications. The other was called immediately after 9/11, when we were all concerned about what was going to be the future of our state and our nation. To say that the argument for sexual orientation rises to that level is absurd. To say that this is historic is untrue. Hysteric it may be. We should have decided it, if at all, during the regular session. Lord knows we've spent years and years on this topic. For those of you that have not heard me over the past 20 years, I've said very loudly and very clearly, the legislature and government should not be involved in marriage. You did not have to worry about separation of church and state, not in our legislature, because you didn't hear a prayer at the beginning of this session. You haven't heard a prayer in several years. Because, again, special interests who pushed the issue pushed us back. Are we truly the representatives of the people, of all the people? I think not. I heard mixed arguments this morning. One is that the tide of history has changed, that people have changed, and so we should listen to them. Except when it means giving them the right to let the people decide. Then we don't want to listen to them. Oh yeah, they're smart enough to vote for us or not vote at all. The public is smart enough to create a salary commission to give us all salary increases automatically. The people are smart enough to vote for a rail to nowhere, but they're not smart enough to vote on basic issues. And why don't legislators want the public to vote? Because the public will vote overwhelmingly in opposition to same-sex marriage. The other night, during our 12-hour hearing, we had between 6,000 and 8,000 people outside, even more if you looked around the corners and on the lawn and everywhere else. Many of those people did not get an opportunity to testify, even though they had signed up to do so. Other people who had signed up early did not get the opportunity to testify. And most of these people, if not all of them, were in opposition. The figures released of those that did get to testify showed that more than 60% were in opposition. And yet we do not want to let the people decide. And there's a real problem with that. Hawaii is the only state out of the 50, or 57 as our president insists, the only state that has neither statewide initiative, referendum, recall, or term limits. So what is the public to do? The public comes down here seeking an opportunity to testify and to participate, and they're denied that. And then they seek to talk to us, to talk about reason and rationality and law, and our minds had already been made up. And now we celebrate a momentous time in history. And individuals have gotten up and told about how they have evolved. They're very proud of their evolution. The governor evolved from his statements as a candidate in 2010. My colleagues in the Senate and in the House that are running for a higher office, they've evolved because they stick their finger up in the wind to see where the votes may be, where the activism may be. And in full disclosure, I married interracially. I have two beautiful interracial sons. I am not a Christian or a Catholic, yet religious. And yet I see a continuing attack and onslaught against Christians and Catholics and people of religion in this community and elsewhere. We were told 5 years ago that our president, his administration, and his followers were going to transform America, the one promise that has been kept. And those that accuse people like me of not evolving, not changing, not going along with the tide and the wave and all of that, stubbornly, steadfastly sticking to tradition and to the Constitution and to what is right. We're called all kinds of names. And we've been given threats as well. And by the way, let me say there is no room for non-respect or lack of civility in this or any other discussion. And the fact that we've had it is sad. This issue, which should not be part of a legislative agenda, especially when we have an economy in shambles, people out of work, people who can't afford food or health care or proper education for their children. We heard about education, but we didn't hear about how we continue to rank low or lowest among the states in educational attainment. We have a terrible infrastructure. We have problems in health care. We have problems with the homeless, with Native Hawaiians and others. And yet we champion this cause, which is not about equal rights. It is about extending a privilege. The Loving case does not apply here. It involved a man and a woman. And while there were wrongs committed in our country and they were redressed, calling something equality and carving out a right does not necessarily make it so, no matter how loud the voices are, no matter how people champion it, like our media, which has been in the bag from the beginning, does not report news, special interest groups and political parties. By calling an elephant a donkey does not make it so. Marriage is marriage. It is separate. We can have disagreements on that. We can talk about equal rights in other areas. But we have become a nation and a state where people every day talk about their new rights that they have. And they misconstrue privilege for right. And they misconstrue entitlements for rights. Our rights are God-given, yet we are told now we can't even allow God in our house. At a time when lawmakers, particularly, as smart as we are, and you all know how smart we are, at a time when we have all of these problems, we are not even allowed to seek divine guidance. And yet we are listening to the voices who say, we represent change. We represent something new. At one point, we're told, listen to the majority. At another point, we're told, don't listen to the majority. Well, I know a little bit about that, being the only one here in the state Senate. This is not a partisan issue, or it should not be, and yet, interestingly, some of the activists pop up in the same issues against religion, against prayer, against a free enterprise capitalist American system, in fact, against America. And we have people that say that the Constitution of the United States is outmoded, that it should be changed, it should be ignored selectively. These people have not read and do not understand the Constitution of the United States or the state of Hawaii. We had a 12-hour hearing the other day. 3 years ago, we had an 18-hour nonstop continuous hearing that I was part of in the Senate. I encourage people to come forward. I encourage people to give their views and opinions. But you should understand that the legislature is not that all-wise and all-seeing. We all have our fallacies and our foibles. And for us to make decisions for a community that is so divided now, just like our nation, is not the best use of our time or our resources. And I have to say that in listening to everyone, yes, there were some intemperate remarks made. Yes, there was repetitive statements made. And yes, there were statements that really were not on point about this issue. Legal scholars, in fact, do differ about whether or not same-sex marriage should be allowed and should be taken under the tent of equal rights. They differ. And yet these views, as are my views, are told that we're out of step. And we're finding more and more in our country and in our legislative bodies that anybody that has a different view is not given that equality of speech. And that's where this bill fails. This bill is an attack on religious freedom and the First Amendment. Make no mistake about it. The so-called protections in this bill, as written now, will not protect religious organizations and their facilities. This bill gives additional legal causes of action, and people will use them. They will continue to sue. Years ago, we were told, if you just pass reciprocal beneficiaries, then everything will be fine. And then we were told if you just pass civil unions, everything would be fine. And yet, honestly, those people who have advocated on the front lines for same-sex marriage have always done so, and that's their right and their privilege. But they haven't been honest and open about it. And are there problems with reciprocal beneficiaries, domestic partners, and civil unions? Yes, there are. And I've said over and over again, in those areas that deny people the right to take care of one another, or to visit in the hospital, or to have power of attorney, those parts of the law that do not meet those standards, then change them. We can do that. That's something that the legislature could do. That's something that the Congress can do. But there was a lot of misinformation the other day, including, with all due respect, our former Supreme Court Justice, Mr. Levinson. First of all, the DOMA law, the Defense of Marriage Act, was not struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court. A section was, and it applied primarily to California and New York. The Supreme Court has not ruled that same-sex marriage is both an equal right and deserved. And Mr. Levinson talked about Iowa, and he was incorrect because in Iowa, the state Supreme Court struck down the same-sex marriage provision, and 3 of the justices who supported it were removed by the Iowa residents. Of course, we don't allow election of judges either in the state of Hawaii. Maybe we should revisit that too, Madam President. Because for those people that didn't like the plantation system in Hawaii, you're sitting in the new plantation right here. We tell you what to think, we tell you what to wear, we tell you who to hire, we tell you how much to pay, we tell you that you must have insurance, we tell you all these things. We are the plantation here. We have more monopolies in this state than anywhere else. We have more unholy alliances between businesses and government than any other state. And then we wonder why our people are struggling. And there are a lot of people that have been afraid in this debate to speak out, and that's a shame. But they are, for one reason or another. And I fully expect in the next few days you're going to hear comments from the Native Hawaiian community about how devastating this law would be to them. And they'll be more specific about it. But all those people that have been cheerleading letting us believe everybody's in favor of this. It's only those few people that are political misanthropes or social laggards, as was described in a publication the other day. It's only us that are opposed to this. Let the people vote. Let the people decide. Let's find out. But we're not going to do that because everything here has been neatly done. And that's a shame. And that is not democracy. And that reflects poorly upon everyone, gay and straight, Republican and Democrat. We have problems in this state, and we have not addressed them. We have so much talent here, and it doesn't matter about your political party or your sexual orientation. But when we try to force people to do certain things that they don't want to do, that is not positive. This bill will not advance life, liberty, or happiness in this state. This bill will not improve our economic conditions. Oh, yes, I know. I know there have been studies saying if we just do this, wow, we'll have more people, more gay and lesbians coming to Hawaii to enjoy our state and spend money. But there'll be other people that will be concerned about that lifestyle and concerned about our image. At last count, 14 states, in fact, have legalized some sort of same-sex marriage, which leaves, in my public school math, 36 states that have not. We talk all the time about trying to better the lives of people. If we worked on our economy, if we worked on making Hawaii a better place, then in fact all people, regardless of their religious outlook, regardless of their sexual orientation, is going to benefit. And that's what we're here for. And you have to hold our feet to the fire, not just on a single issue, but on what we're doing for the state. We are all public servants. We all are beholden to you. You pay for everything we do. But you've got to be more involved. You've got to be more engaged. And don't let me hear any of you say your vote doesn't matter. You don't matter. Your vote in this issue matters. Your vote in every issue matters. So I appeal to my colleagues that before they uncork the bottles of champagne, that they be fully concerned about what this measure and others like it do in our community. We should be working to bring people together. We should be working to help those people who need help. This is not the case. And we've learned over the years, and particularly over the last couple of days, that this issue is not about love, it's not about compassion, it's not about equal rights, it's about money. It's about tax benefits. It's about federal benefits. And even the Attorney General, in his very unique way of answering questions, had to admit that if you want to go to another state, as many people do on a regular basis, including to get married, you will not lose those benefits. You will gain those benefits. But you know what it tells me? It tells me that what I've been fighting for the 18 years I've been here, that our taxes are too high, our government regulations too unfair, the fees and everything that are eating you alive. That's what we should be doing. That's what we should be together on a bipartisan basis. So I'll leave you with this thought. Passing a law like this is not going to solve our problems, is is not going to make divisions go away. But it will get people concerned who have been disenfranchised and who realize that their government is going in a different direction from them. It's not bad to disagree on any issue. And it certainly is not bad to stick up for your beliefs and your rights and your freedom of speech. I believe that this bill will be compromised, and I will continue to oppose it. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Baker.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in
I
strong...
remind the public again to refrain from any audio, any kind of responses. Otherwise, we will clear the gallery. Please proceed, Senator Baker.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in strong support of equal rights and Senate Bill 1.
Please proceed.
I firmly believe that equal rights delayed are equal rights denied, and perhaps the urgency was brought on by the Supreme Court action on the defense of marriage. But even if it hadn't come from that, I still think this is an action we should have taken, and it's appropriate to do it now. There were hearings. We've all received email, letters, phone calls, and other communications, in-person visits. So it's not as if we don't understand the issues or even know what our constituents think. It is about equal protection of the laws, in my view. I grew up in the Deep South. I started first grade in 1952, graduated high school in 64, went to college, graduated college in 68. For the entire 12 years of my elementary, middle school, and high school years, I did not go to school with one black child, although there were plenty of black children in my town. They went to a separate school. I've seen up close and personal the ugly face of discrimination. And with every minority group, you simply don't put their rights on the ballot for a popular vote, because like the decision to get rid of the so-called separate but equal doctrine, if we'd put that on the ballot, do you think that those black schools would have gone out of existence in the state of Texas? No, they wouldn't have. And those children who deserved the kind of good quality education that I received, with teachers well qualified to teach them and paid equally what the teachers in my school were paid at the time, wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have had any of the advancements in equal rights if they'd been put up to a popular vote. Minorities don't ever get their rights that way. And that, to me, is one of the fundamental reasons that we need to continue to move Senate Bill 1 forward. It is about equality of rights under the law, and as long as marriage has a status in our code, whether it's tax, whether it's being able to make sure that your children or your partner's wishes are upheld if you pass, it is tied up with what's in our statute. And it does make an unequal situation. I met a woman yesterday. I'd gone over to the UH Cancer Center to hear an eminent, distinguished professor on public policy dealing with smoking and e-cigarettes, thinking that, these are some of the things we may be dealing with. And I had an occasion to talk to his wife after. And she relayed to me, she said, I understand you folks are dealing with enabling same-sex marriage in Hawaii, and she was from California. And she says, I just want to relate a story to you, what happened to a friend of mine, and I think it will give you, if you needed any additional reason for supporting the enactment of Senate Bill 1, this would be something you might want to consider. She had friends, a couple, lesbian couple, who had a son. and the couple was driving down the highway, and another car hit them almost head on, killed one of the women. The other one went to the hospital. The young son, who was strapped into a backseat seat, he was in a child restraint because he was only about 18 months old, I think, in the back seat, and he survived without a scratch. The woman who was killed happened to be his birth mother. His other mother went to the hospital. The grandmother, the mother of the birth mother, came and took the child, and when the other mother came out of the hospital and was well enough to be reunited with her son and take care of that son, the grandmother made sure that that woman never, ever saw her son again. That's why we need same-sex marriage, to provide those protections for couples in committed relationships who may have children. But that's just one example. I think it's important for us to understand how fundamental equal rights are in our Constitution, in our form of government, and do everything that we can to ensure it. That's one of the reasons that I'm standing in strong support of Senate Bill 1. But it's also because with the DOMA decision, we have folks who are civil union couples in our state but cannot access the full benefits that the decision of the United States Supreme Court with regard to federal benefits allowed. And I was very pleased when the chair of the Judiciary and Labor Committee asked for the Attorney General to provide the committee with a list of those benefits that would be denied if we did not pass same-sex marriage in our state and continue to have our folks be unequal under the law. And Madam President, I think all of my colleagues received a copy of that memorandum in our email this morning, and with your permission, I'd like to have that included in the journal as another example of why we need to be moving this measure forward.
So ordered.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to close with some of the words of Eleanor Roosevelt. She happens to be one of my mentors and one of the people that I look up to as I do Patsy Mink. And I think these are very instructive. She begins, "Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood that he or she lives in, the school or college where he or she attends, the factory, farm or office where he or she works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seek equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination." Madam President, I submit that's what SB1 does. Mahalo.
Thank you. Further discussion, member.
Madam
Senator
President.
Ige,
Yes, I rise to speak in support of this measure.
please proceed.
Yes, thank you. I support Senate Bill 1 as it seeks to balance providing equal rights and protections and benefits to same-sex couples as opposite-sex couples. I did want to commend the chair of the Judiciary and Labor Committee for his work on the bill, seeking to find the appropriate balance of protecting religious freedoms with providing equal rights. I did want to comment, all of you know that we were summoned here to deal with this issue. This was not of our choosing. But I did want to commend the Senate Judiciary and Labor Committee and all of the members of the committee for their work on this bill. I think for anyone who observed the hearings, and more importantly, I guess the staff for organizing it in the way that they did. I think for anyone who observed the hearings, I think they would all agree that even though we did not have the time to hear each and every individual who showed up and wanted to speak, I thought that the discourse was very respectful. The committee was managed very well, the members engaged, both those in support and those in opposition, in appropriate and in-depth questions that allowed the entire community to benefit from the conversation. And I think at the end of the day, at 10 p.m. or so, when the committee had concluded their work and the final vote was taken, I really believe that many felt that both sides had the opportunity to share their opinions and their perspectives on the measure, and the committee had listened patiently and engaged, and the votes fell where they may. So once again, I just would like to commend the chair, the committee, and the staff for really managing the situation that we were put in very respectfully and thoughtfully. And I think at the end of the day today, we have an opportunity to vote our conscience and make the decision to provide equal treatment to same-sex couples. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. Senator Gabbard,
Madam President, I rise in strong opposition to SB1.
please proceed.
I, too, would like to say mahalo to the Judiciary Chair and his staff for laboring long and hard in crafting the bill. Also, let me thank the same senator who represents the North Shore and his staff for all their hard work in putting together our Judiciary Labor Committee hearing on Monday that was run very well, very orderly. And also, of course, mahalo to the Senate clerks, the Sergeant of Arms, and the sheriffs who did a masterful job at Monday's almost 12-hour hearing. Colleagues, here in Hawaii, we have been having this statewide conversation about same-sex marriage for about 23 years. And sometimes the discussions have been civil, cordial, and productive. At other times, there have been death threats, bodily harm, TROs, and speaking from personal experience, even businesses being forced to close because of the owners publicly opposing same-sex marriage. And I know the emails have been pouring into your offices as well. Let's see. I'm sure most of you did not get the ones calling you a hater, a homophobe, a Nazi, etc. I think those are reserved for the minority leader and myself. But maybe you got the ones calling you Satan and that you're going to burn in hell eternally if you vote the wrong way on this measure. So much for the Aloha spirit. My point is that this has been a contentious, divisive issue for over 20 years. And some of you may be thinking, yeah, okay, so enough already. Let's put it to rest. Let's be the 15th state in the country to legalize same-sex marriage and be done with it. But if we do that, do you really think that this issue will be any less contentious? Right now, the most recent poll by Honolulu Civil Beat shows the people of our state are now split down the middle with 44% in favor and 44% opposed to legalizing same-sex marriage. So the obvious question is, why the urgency, and why are we trying to cram an issue of this magnitude into a short special session? As Senator Ige mentioned, it was imposed. We did not decide to be here on our own. This was imposed upon us. We all saw the thousands of people that showed up on Monday to lend their voices on both sides of the issue, but we unfortunately didn't give the same opportunity to the people on the neighbor islands. What about that farmer in Kaunakakai who couldn't afford the airfare to come to Oahu to testify? What about the mother of 3 in Poipu who feels so strongly about expressing her point of view at the public hearing, whether for or against, but again could not afford the plane fare and the babysitters? I know some people have said, hey, we've talked this issue to death and we've already heard all of the arguments. That may very well be. But the real issue here is, have we really done all that we can to give the opportunity for people's voices to be heard? After all, isn't that what the democratic process is all about? This is even more reason that we should heed the advice of the people who are urging us to let the people decide by putting this back on the ballot in 2014 as a constitutional amendment. The fact is, there are many valid concerns that opponents of this bill have, and it's a mistake to ram this through without taking the time to really address them. What I heard during our marathon hearing on Monday is that people are very worried about the protection of religious freedom and how this also will impact our children's education. And although I acknowledge the assurances from the senator from Kailua and senator from Waipahu about opt-out provisions in DOE policy, for our taxpayer-funded public schools, people should not have to worry about their kids being taught that homosexual relations are normal and natural if that isn't what they believe. Yet, based on the experience of other jurisdictions with same-sex marriage, both in this country and abroad, it's likely this will happen. Will the tax-paying parents who strongly oppose same-sex marriage be forced to homeschool or send their kids to private schools to keep their values, their family's values intact? We all know this issue isn't going to go away if SB1 passes into law. So what I'm asking is, let's take some more time to really figure this out. Let's take this issue on the road to all the islands. Let's talk story, continue the conversation, and let people on both sides weigh in and possibly come up with the Aloha solution. Let's vote this down today and resume our deliberations in the upcoming session in January. Colleagues, I urge you to vote no on SB1. Mahalo and ke akua me ke aloha.
Further discussion. Member Senator Thielen.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of SB1.
Please proceed.
I can't be as eloquent as many of the speakers who came before me. I actually didn't plan to speak. I think the Senate Judiciary Chair and many of the others have really stated the reasons why I support this bill. But I am rising today because I want to address some of the remarks that were made by the Senate Minority Leader, particularly about the separation of church and state. The Senate Minority Leader saying that he didn't hear this session open with prayer and implied that special interests are lobbying to push this bill and to restrict the freedom of religion and expression. I stand before you with a slightly different view on the freedom of religion. As I've shared with many of you, I am a direct descendant of William Brewster, who was one of the leaders of the pilgrims who came over to this, the mainland country on the Mayflower. And the reason that he left England is because he practiced a religion that was different than the official religion of the Church of England. And he published sermons about his religion, and he and the fellow believers in his religion were under threat of their life. And so they fled first to the Netherlands. And while he was in the Netherlands, he continued to publish sermons from his religion. And the Church of England sent representatives over to the town of Leiden to ask the Dutch government to repatriate him back to England, either to jail him or to execute him. And because they were worried about the relationship between the Dutch and the British, the Puritans then secured the Mayflower and sailed to the New World to start a new country. I am also the direct descendant of one of the founding fathers of the United States of America, Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry refused to sign the United States Constitution because he felt it centralized too much power and control in the federal government, and it was not respectful of the rights of the citizens. And he and others were instrumental in getting the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, added to the United States Constitution. And the very first amendment in that Constitution is the separation of church and state. It prohibits the government from establishing a religion. And it does that not because it is against religion. It does it to protect everyone's right to their own religious beliefs. It does it because government has to be neutral. It does it to protect people like my ancestor, so government cannot say that one religion is right and believers of a different faith are wrong and that you cannot pray in that way. I think while there's been much talk about the fact that we've had a special session and didn't listen to people, I think if people take a look at the bill in SB1 and the original draft of the bill, you will see that there was a lot of listening. We received a lot of testimony, a lot of calls, had a lot of meetings before this session ever began, when the first draft of the bill was posted by the governor's office. I know the two chairs of the Judiciary Committee on the House and the Senate side both worked with the Attorney General's office to try and address those concerns. I was on the phone a number of times to try and ask them to address the concerns as well with the bill, because I support the freedom of religion. but I also support same-sex marriage as an equal right. And I don't speak as somebody who has evolved. I campaigned against the constitutional amendment 15 years ago by going door to door in my neighborhood to ask people to vote against it because I felt that the judicial interpretation that our Constitution allowed freedom of same-gender marriage should have been honored from the beginning. And I would never put that right up for a popular vote, just as I would never put up the First Amendment for a popular vote. Because these are ingrained. These Bill of Rights are what make our country unique in the world. We did do a lot of changes from the original draft in the bill, and I stand before today again thanking the Senate Judiciary Chair and others for making sure that those went into place. I feel that we have found a very, very good balance that respects the full First Amendment rights of freedom of religion for the churches, but also respects the equal rights to be free from discrimination for the same-gender couples, and it ensures that government acts in a neutral manner when we issue government licenses so that we do not discriminate based upon gender orientation in marriage. Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, Senator Ihara.
Madam President, I rise in support of Senate Bill 1.
Please proceed.
Madam President, I was inspired by the speech from our newest senator from Maui, who is looking forward to his 8th wedding anniversary. For many years, I had thought about taking a stand and not marrying until everyone has it right. But when I found the love of my life, I could not withhold marrying. This past February, my wife and I celebrated our 7th wedding anniversary. And I know my wife's views on this issue, so I am dedicating my vote today to her, so that we may allow all of our gay friends also the happiness of marriage. And if and when Senate bill passes, this will indeed be a very, very special session. Thank you, Madam President.
Further discussion, members? Senator Sloan.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a very brief rebuttal. We talked earlier, and the majority leader talked about compromise, and I certainly agree with that. I think the mark of any good legislation is the fact that in the end, people have compromised and they come to an agreement and they can accept what there is. Despite what has been said over and over again, there are no religious protections in this bill as written now. And the proof of that is no religious person who had opposed the original legislation came forward and said, oh, yeah, you guys really did a good job. You really worked hard. You really were in there together to make sure that there was a balance. There is no balance in this bill. It is totally one-sided. And so those people that may be surprised later on, after this becomes law, if it does, should not be surprised because we've discussed it. Madam President, I call for a roll call vote.
So ordered. Further discussion. Senator He.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support.
Please proceed.
First, I want to thank my colleagues who have been overly generous in thanking me for running the hearing on Monday, and I'm grateful and appreciative. And as I said yesterday, it could not have been done but for the organized efforts of our Senate Clerk, the Sergeant-at-Arms, and the sheriffs, and the staff. So I'm very appreciative. And of course, the members of the committee. I want to say something in some of the dialogue that I've heard over the time. And I want to do so in the context of some of the soundbite statements made by the minority leader. many of which are frankly untrue. If you can read English, and if you can read Senate Bill number 1, it's explicit in its religious protections. But I know I'm talking the choir boy singing to the choir, because I think all of you can read English. Evidently, some of us refuse to read English. And I'll leave it at that. The minority leader talked about surprises. Well, it should come as no surprise to him that in 1998, when he voted aye on House Bill 117, Senate Draft 1, Conference Draft 1, that he voted aye on the following bill, which said in part, quote, "The legislature further finds that the question of whether or not the state should issue marriage license to couples of the same sex is a fundamental policy issue to be decided by the elected representatives of the people." He voted aye. His tune has changed. The bill continues, "This constitutional measure is thus designed to confirm that the legislature has the power to reserve marriage to opposite-sex couples." And here is the part that he evidently does not understand in English. "And to ensure that the legislature will remain open to the petitions of those who seek a change in the marriage laws, and that such petitioners can be considered on an equal basis with those who oppose a change in our current marriage statutes." He voted aye. He voted aye with 6 other members who are with us today. On October 28th, Monday, Professor Robin Freewell Wilson, a professor at law at the University of Illinois and co-editor of Same-Sex Marriage and Religious Liberty, Emerging Conflicts, said in a published article in the Star Advertiser, that Senate Bill 1, and I'm quoting now, sensibly says the facility be used for profit and donations don't count, is an improvement over the governor's proposal. She says that the religious freedoms that exist, and I'm summarizing now, that exist today remain tomorrow should this bill become law. Although she writes that there should be other improvements to be considered, she makes it very clear that the religious freedoms protected and enjoyed today remain tomorrow in Senate Bill 1 as enshrined in the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the State of Hawaii. Thank you very much.
Senator English.
Madam President, I rise in support of the measure.
Please proceed.
I take exception to some of the statements made by the minority leader regarding the positions and views of Native Hawaiians. He's hardly the one to speak on our behalf. I'd like to enter into the record today the editorial that was in the Honolulu Star Advertiser this morning by Hinale Moana Wangkalu, titled Hawaiian Values Differ from Western Traditions.
So ordered.
And just to summarize, what Hina talks about is basically saying you cannot merge the idea of Hawaiian values and Western. You cannot choose between the two and have both of them. Either you practice Hawaiian culture and you choose to do so, or you choose a Christian culture, you choose a Roman Catholic culture, you choose a Buddhist culture. It doesn't matter. The point is that you cannot merge the two. I think that the article is germane today because it lays out some of the traditional Hawaiian marriages, aikane, punalua, and other types of marriages. This is our traditional Hawaiian marriages. So when people say, let's defend traditional marriage, yes, of course, I defend the traditional Hawaiian marriages. So I'd like to enter this into the record so that we have a clear understanding of what exactly this means. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Solomon.
Thank you, Madam President. I also rise in support.
Please proceed.
And I would like to support the remarks that were made by the Judiciary Chairman. And I was part of that 1998 where we all voted, and I do strongly believe that these matters must be settled in the legislature. And if I may, Madam Chairman, I'd like to just deviate from the issues that have just been discussed by all the previous speakers, just to remind this body that the persons that really have been discriminated in the state of Hawaii have been the Native Hawaiians. And I'm very pleased that we have come so far in our thoughts of how we have evolved. And I'm hoping that these thoughts will still continue when we look at the Hawaiian issues as those of being equal rights. You know, we have been, and I want to give a lot of credit to our Senator Akaka, who has championed our positions in the federal government to get federal recognition of the Hawaiian people, which that has not happened to this day. I want to thank my colleagues on this floor who voted for Native Hawaiians to be finally recognized by the state of Hawaii as equal partners. So I'm hoping, as I think I discussed it with you, Madam President, when our Judiciary Chairman decided to change the title of this bill and to say, hey, we caucused on the issue, we agreed, and we talked about this title now talking about equal rights. And then I indicated to you at that time, Madam President, gee, could I attach another chapter to this bill? Yeah, to talk about equal rights for Native Hawaiians. And it really distresses me how this body conveniently uses Native Hawaiian values and culture to benefit their own agenda when they, in fact, have not even given the Hawaiians their due justice. I was at a hearing early on when some of my colleagues had questioned the integrity as to whether or not Hawaiians should be able to use their exemptions that they were given in developing their own Hawaiian economic future. Why would that even come up, Madam President? These weren't given at the free will of this body. These were negotiated. These were discussed. It took years of deliberation, similar to what we're discussing today. This issue has been in this legislature for over 30 years. This isn't something that's new. And maybe if we're talking about evolution, which I've heard many times on this floor, then maybe we have finally evolved, Madam President, to finally give the Native Hawaiian people their due justice. So I'd like to close with the remarks of, no, not the remarks, the song of Hawaii Aloha. Oli e, oli e. Yeah, na o pio o Hawaii ne. May we rejoice for the youth of this land. that they may have a future that we can give to them. So they, in fact, can evolve. And they, in fact, can create a society that is equal and free to all. Gender-free, colorblind, and it goes on and on. Madam President, this is what I feel that we must malama, which means to take care, and we must ike, which means to recognize, and we must pono, which means to do right. Mahalo.
Further discussion, members? If not, a roll call vote has been called for. Before we take the roll call, I do want, on behalf of the Senate, thank everyone who have participated in the process, whether you are for or against this issue, that you have all taken the time to send your emails, your phone calls, appear at the hearings. There have been a lot of work that went into this that the public do not see. As it was said earlier, this was not the call of the legislature. The governor has called us into this special session. It required a lot of work over the past 7 weeks, working together with the House, with staff. I want to thank all the support staff that have helped to make the process a little bit easier. And while nothing is perfect, I commend this body for the process that we have been through. And with that, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Baker?
Aye.
Senator Chun Oakland?
Aye.
Senator Dela Cruz? Senator English?
Aye.
Senator Espero?
Yes for love and equality.
Senator Gabbard? No. Senator Galataria? Senator Green? Senator He? Senator Ige?
Aye.
Senator Ihara?
Aye.
Senator Kahele?
Aye.
Senator Keith Agaran? Senator Kidani? Senator Kochi? Senator Nishihara? Senator Ruderman? Senator Shimabukuro? Senator Sloan? Senator Solomon? Senator Taniguchi?
Aye.
Senator Thielen? Senator Tokuda? Senator Wakai?
Excused.
Madam President,
No.
20 ayes, 4 noes.
Let me explain the absence of Senator Wakai. I'd like to send our sympathy to him because his mother just passed away this morning, so that's why he's not here. With that, Madam Clerk. Oh, I'm sorry. Madam,
We have 20 ayes, 4 noes, and 1 excuse.
Senate Bill 1 passes third reading.
Madam President, we have a supplemental order of the day.
Please proceed.
House Communication Numbers 1 and 2 transmit House Bills Numbers 1 and 2, which passed third reading in the House, for first reading and referral to committee.
Senator Sparrow.
I move that said House bills pass first reading by title and be referred to committee.
Senator Sloan.
I second that motion.
So moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The motion is carried. House Bill 1 and 2 are referred jointly to the Committees on Judiciary and Labor and Ways and Means.
No further business, Madam President.
Are there any announcements today, Senator He?
Thank you, Madam President. The House bills referred to the Committee on Judiciary and Labor will be heard tomorrow at 12 o'clock in room 211. 211. Thank you.
Further announcements, members? If not, Senator Sparrow.
Prayer and condolences for the mother of our Senator Glenn Wakai. I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 11:30 a.m. tomorrow.
Senator Sloan.
May God bless the Wakai family. I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. If there are no objections from the members, the Senate will stand adjourned until 11:30 a.m. tomorrow.